This prison didn't need bars. It didn't need chains. It broke people using silence, isolation, and voices no one else could hear. And years after it was abandoned, those voices found someone new. This is Hohenschönhausen Prison THE story. The room that still asks questions from the outside, Hohenschönhausen Prison looks almost harmless. Low buildings, blank walls, no towers, no dramatic gates. It blends into the neighborhood like it was never meant to be noticed. That was the design. This was a secret prison. People were brought here blindfolded, no signs, no records, no witnesses. Once inside, prisoners were interrogated for weeks, sometimes months, without seeing daylight. When it was finally abandoned, officials sealed entire sections underground. They said the rooms were unsafe. They didn't say why. In 2016, a freelance videographer named Lucas entered the site illegally after hours. He specialized in filming abandoned Cold War locations. His plan was simple: explore the underground isolation wing, record 10 minutes of footage, and leave. He never left. Security cameras outside the facility recorded Lucas entering the grounds at 12:07 a.m. There is no footage of him exiting. 2 days later, police found him in interrogation room 12, a room designed with padded walls, no windows, and soundproofing so complete prisoners could scream without being heard. The door was open. Lucas was kneeling in the center of the room, dead. No visible injuries, no blood, no signs of struggle. His face was frozen in terror. Autopsy results showed massive cardiac trauma, as if his heart had been overstimulated for hours. Doctors said it resembled extreme stress combined with auditory hallucinations. Then they reviewed his camera. The footage begins normally. Shaky flashlight beams, quiet breathing, whispered commentary. But when Lucas enters room 12, something changes. The audio spikes. A second voice appears. Low, flat, mechanical. It begins asking questions. Not random questions. Interrogation prompts pulled directly from declassified Stasi documents. Who sent you? Who else knows? When did you start lying? Lucas answers. At first he laughs, thinking it's stress. Then his tone changes. His answers become frantic. His breathing sharpens. He begins apologizing, not for anything specific, but for existing. At one point he says, "Please stop asking. I don't remember anymore." The voice responds, "That is the correct condition." For nearly 40 minutes, the camera records Lucas sitting perfectly still, answering questions no one in the room is asking. Then he goes silent. The camera keeps recording. In the final frame, Lucas slowly turns his head toward the corner of the room, a corner known by former prisoners as the listening spot. He whispers one last sentence. "I think it followed me in." The footage cuts out. Room 12 was sealed permanently after that. Former guards admit something they were never trained to explain. The prison doesn't create ghosts. It creates Interrogatorschönheitsexercises, also es ist eines Ausleis prison no longer operates, but the rooms are still arranged for questioning. And if you enter the wrong one, the prison doesn't ask who you are. It asks how long you can hold out. If you want more stories where people walk into abandoned prisons and never walk out the same, or at all, stay with this channel. Because some places don't need guards anymore. They already know how to break you. This prison was abandoned, but not emptied. Guards said something stayed behind in the cell blocks. Something that learned how to punish on its own. And when one man went inside after dark, the prison finished what it started. This is Graterford Prison THE story. The block that locked itself. From the outside, Graterford Prison looks endless. Concrete walls stretch wide, broken only by guard towers and razor wire. Even abandoned, the place feels active, like it's still enforcing distance. Inside the main gate, the air changes. Sound dulls, light flattens, movement feels supervised. Graterford wasn't built to rehabilitate. It was built to contain pressure, violence, anger, despair, packed into massive housing units known as cell blocks. When the prison shut down, officials transferred inmates and sealed sections in stages. One block was closed first. Cell Block C former staff said it was unstable, not structurally, behaviorally. Cameras malfunctioned, doors jammed. Inmates reported hearing orders shouted over intercoms that weren't active. Years later, in 2020, a paranormal researcher named Daniel Brooks entered the abandoned prison illegally with audio gear and a body cam. He planned to document what he believed was residual trauma. He went in alone. At 1:02 a.m., Daniel entered cell block C. His footage shows long tiers of cells stacked above each other, doors hanging open, shadows pooling unnaturally in corners. The silence is thick, not empty. Then the block reacts. Metal doors begin to close, not slamming, locking, one by one. Daniel laughs nervously, assuming gravity or decay. Then the final door shuts behind him. He stops. The temperature drops sharply. His breath becomes visible. Over the audio, a low voice comes through, distorted, layered, overlapping itself. Inmate present. Daniel panics and rushes for the exit. The door doesn't move. Inside the cell block, lights flicker on. Not all at once, but cell by cell, illuminating empty cages like something checking inventory. Then the voice returns, not shouting, whispering directly into the microphone. Remain standing. Daniel begins screaming for help. His camera captures something moving along the upper tier. Not a figure, but a shadow shaped like a man being restrained, arms pulled back, head forced forward. It drops. The footage shakes violently. Daniel is thrown against the bars of a cell with enough force to break ribs. You hear bones crack. He gasps, then goes silent. The camera keeps rolling. For 12 minutes, the shadow moves around him, tightening, adjusting, pressing him back against the bars like restraints without chains. At 1:27 a.m., the cell block goes dark. When police finally entered the prison the next day, they found Daniel inside cell block C dead. His spine was fractured in 3 places. His wrists were bruised like they'd been held behind his back. There were no fingerprints on him. Cell block C was sealed permanently after that. Former guards later admitted something they never reported. Graterford wasn't haunted. It was Trinidad Graterford Prison is quiet now. But quiet doesn't mean inactive. Some prisons don't release what they hold. They become it. So if you ever enter an abandoned cell block and hear a command spoken softly, obey it. Because the last thing Graterford teaches is how to stay still while it finishes. If you want more stories where abandoned prisons still enforce their rules, stay here. There are places that don't need guards anymore. They already learned how to kill. This prison was abandoned years ago, but something inside it never stopped experimenting. And when a man went in to document what was left behind, the prison tested him one last time. This is Holmesburg Prison's story. The trial that was never closed. Holmesburg Prison sits heavy in its neighborhood brick walls, stained dark, narrow windows like sealed eyes. From the outside, it looks tired. From up close, it feels alert. Inside, the air is sharp and chemical, even decades after closure. Corridors run tight and low, pulling sound inward. The cell blocks are unevenly lit, as if the building never agreed on where light should exist. Holmesburg was infamous for human experimentation. Inmates were used as test subjects, chemical trials, skin experiments, procedures never meant to be remembered. When the prison shut down, officials removed equipment. They did not remove the process. In 2019, a local videographer named Aaron Klein entered the abandoned complex at night to film a short documentary on unethical prison history. He carried a camera, a headlamp, and a handheld audio recorder. At 12:41 a.m., he entered the medical wing. The footage shows peeling paint, metal gurneys bolted to the floor, restraints still mounted to walls. As Aaron walks deeper, his breathing changes. He pauses repeatedly, as if listening for instructions he can't quite hear. Then the recorder picks something up. A faint clicking. Not footsteps. Not voices. A steady rhythm like a timer. Aaron whispers, "That's not me." As he enters an examination room, the temperature drops sharply. The camera fogs. The clicking grows louder, joined by a low hum, electrical, deliberate. Then a voice cuts through. Calm, clinical, inhuman. Subject present. Aaron panics and backs toward the door. It won't open. The voice continues, layered with another beneath it, slightly out of sync. Begin trial. The camera captures shadows crawling across the walls, thin, jointed shapes that move like hands adjusting restraints that aren't there. Aaron screams as something grabs him from behind, slamming him onto the gurney with enough force to crack bone. You hear him pleading, "I didn't consent." The voice answers immediately. Consent recorded. For 6 minutes, the audio records Aaron convulsing as unseen pressure crushes his chest and arms, pinning him down. His skin darkens in patches, blistering as if exposed to chemicals that no longer exist. The clicking stops. The room goes silent. When police entered the prison 2 days later, they found Aaron dead on the gurney. Cause of death? Multiple organ failure. Medical examiners found chemical burns inside his lungs. No chemicals were present. The medical wing was sealed that week. Former guards admitted something off record. Holmesburg never stopped running trials. It just stopped needing equipment. The Holmesburg Prison is empty now. But empty doesn't mean inactive. Some places don't need staff to keep working. They only need a subject. So if you ever walk into an abandoned prison and hear something measuring time, leave. Because once Holmesburg begins a test, it records the results in bodies. If you want more stories where abandoned prisons still finish their experiments, stay with this channel. There are places that don't need permission anymore. They already learned how to take it. This prison wasn't surrounded by walls. It was surrounded by fields. And people who worked here said the land itself learned how to punish. When one man went inside after dark, the farm finished what it started. This is Parchman Farm Prison's story. The field that collects people. Parchman Farm Prison stretches across miles of flat Mississippi land. From the outside, it doesn't look like a prison at all, just open fields. Low buildings, dirt roads cutting through endless rows. That was the trap. There were no walls because there didn't need to be. The land was part of the sentence. Inside the abandoned compound, the buildings sit far apart, connected by long walks across open ground. At night, the wind moves freely, carrying sound for miles. Every step feels exposed. Former inmates used to say the worst part wasn't the labor. it was being watched by nothing. In 2021, a freelance historian named Caleb Morris entered the abandoned sections of Parchman Farm to document the remains of the old barracks and work sheds. He went alone, arriving just before sunset. At 7:18 p.m., he parked his truck at the edge of the property and walked in with a camera and flashlight. The first thing he noticed was the silence. No insects, no birds, just wind sliding through grass. As darkness settled, Caleb entered one of the old inmate barracks. Inside, the air smelled of rot and soil. Wooden bunks sagged. Floorboards creaked like they were under tension. Then the land responded. From outside, footsteps began circling the building, not running, not approaching, marching, slow, heavy, perfectly spaced. Caleb whispered that it sounded like a work line. His camera audio picked up voices, dozens of them low and strained, humming in rhythm, not singing, counting time. When Caleb stepped back outside, the field had changed. The grass lay flattened in wide paths leading away from the barracks, as if hundreds of people had just passed through. The paths all pointed toward the old work fields. Against instinct, Caleb followed them. The farther he walked, the heavier his body felt. His breathing became labored. His legs dragged like the ground itself resisted being crossed. Then he heard a voice behind him, not shouting, ordering, back in line. Caleb turned, and the field was full. Shapes stood in rows, barely visible, heads bowed, shoulders slumped. Not solid bodies, but impressions in the air, pressed down into the grass. Hands grabbed him, not gripping, skin-gripping weight. Caleb screamed as he was forced forward, dragged between the rows. His camera fell, still recording, aimed upward at the sky. The audio captures his final moments, choking, sobbing, begging to stop working. Then the humming grows louder, closer. At 8:02 p.m., the sound cuts off. Caleb's body was found the next morning in the middle of the field. His lungs were filled with mud. There were no drag marks, just footprints, hundreds of them, ending exactly where he lay. Parchman Farm Prison is quiet now, but the land still remembers the routine. Some prisons don't need walls, locks, or bars. They use distance. They use exhaustion. And once the work starts, it doesn't end with death. If you want more stories where abandoned prisons still claim people who enter them, stay with this channel. Because some places don't haunt buildings. They haunt the ground. This prison still operates, but some of its oldest cell blocks were sealed and forgotten. Guards say those blocks don't echo anymore. They answer back. And when one man went inside after lockdown, the old block finished his sentence. This is San Quentin State Prison, the old cell block story, the tear that never released. From the outside, San Quentin presses against the bay-gray stone, iron gates, the smell of salt and cold metal. The water is close enough to hear, but never close enough to comfort. Even active yards feel tense here. The old cell blocks sit deeper inside, shut down and cut off. Narrow windows, steep tiers. Iron stairs worn smooth by decades of feet, moving in lines they didn't choose. Inside those blocks, light dies fast. In 2022, a contracted electrician named Victor Halle was authorized to enter a sealed section to check dead conduits after a power anomaly. He was told not to go above Tier 3. He nodded, signed the waiver, went in alone. At 10:14 p.m., Victor unlocked the old gate. His body cam shows rusted bars, long runs of empty cells, and darkness stacked above darkness. The air is colder than the rest of the prison still, heavy, like it's waiting to be disturbed. As Victor climbs to Tier 2, the sound changes. Not louder, closer. A low murmur begins, indistinct, layered, like many people speaking at once, but perfectly restrained. The cam audio struggles to isolate it. Victor stops. The murmur stops. He moves again. It resumes. At the end of Tier 2, a voice breaks free, clear, calm, and behind him. Eyes forward. Victor spins. No one is there. Then cell doors begin to move. Not opening, adjusting. Bars scrape softly as if aligning themselves. A murmur becomes rhythmic breaths falling into time. Victor's breathing sinks without him noticing. He reaches Tier 3. The temperature drops sharply. The cam fogs. Victor whispers, but he feels lightheaded. A second voice, different, older, answers through the static. Stand on the mark. Victor steps forward. The floor beneath him is etched with faint paint, long faded, but unmistakable. A standing position used during counts decades ago. A murmur swells. Victor tries to step back. His legs don't respond. The cam shows shadows pulling inward from the cell's thin, human-shaped compressions that don't detach from the walls. They press toward him, not grabbing, but positioning. Victor's heart rate spikes on the cam overlay. He gasps. His chest tightens as if a belt is being drawn closed. He whispers, "I didn't do anything." The voice answers, patient and absolute. That is not required. The shadows converge. Victor collapses, pinned upright against the bar's arms back, shoulders forced square. The cam captures the sound of breath being forced out of him, again and again, until it stops. At 10:29 p.m., the murmur cuts off. The block goes silent. Victor was found the next morning on Tier 3, standing where he fell, supported by the bars. Cause of death: cardiac arrest induced by extreme stress. No marks. No fingerprints. The old cell blocks were resealed that day. A senior guard later said off record, "Those tiers don't want noise. They want order. San Quentin's old cell blocks are closed now, but closure doesn't mean release. Some places don't remember crimes, they remember posture. So if you ever step into an abandoned tier and feel your body straighten on its own, leave. Because when the old blocks call account, they don't care who you are." If you want more stories where abandoned prisons still enforce their rules, stay with this channel. Some sentences never ended. They're just waiting for the next person to stand in place. This prison sits beside the river, still operating today. But its oldest wings were sealed for a reason. Guards say those wings don't hold inmates anymore. They hold judgment. And when one man crossed the barrier after hours, the old wing decided his sentence. This is Sing Sing Prison, the old wing's THE story. The chapel door. From the outside, Sing Sing rises like a wall against the Hudson gray stone. Narrow windows, watchtowers cutting the skyline. The river moves constantly beside it, dark and patient, carrying sound away. The old wings sit apart from the modern blocks. Lower ceilings, thicker walls, doors built before mercy was a concept. Inside those wings, the air smells like iron and damp stone. Sound behaves badly. Footsteps arrive before you take them. Echoes come back wrong, like they've been handled by something else first. In 2021, a contracted archivist named Thomas Reed was authorized to retrieve forgotten ledgers from a sealed corridor near the old chapel wing. He was given one rule: do not open the chapel door. The chapel had been closed for decades after repeated incidents, unexplained injuries, sudden illness, and one death never officially documented. At 9:36 p.m., Thomas crossed into the old wing alone. His body cam shows rows of empty cells, iron bars corroded into dark veins, and a long corridor ending at a wooden door with faded paint and a small iron cross bolted upside down. The chapel door. As Thomas approached, the temperature dropped sharply. His breath fogged. The river outside went silent, as if the water itself had stopped moving. From behind the door, something whispered. Not a voice. A choir out of sync, layered, speaking different phrases at once. The cam audio distorts violently. Thomas backs away. The whisper follows him, inside his head. He begins answering questions no one asked, confessing to things he didn't do, apologizing to names he doesn't recognize. Then the door clicks, unlocked. The camera jolts as Thomas is pulled forward, not dragged, but invited. His feet move on their own. His hands open the door. Inside, the chapel is wrong. Pews face inward, forming a circle. The altar is bare. The walls are lined with hooks where restraints once hung. Candle wax stains the floor in uneven patterns that look intentional. The voices stop. One presence remains. Thomas drops to his knees, shaking. He sobs, begging it to stop judging him. His chest tightens. The cam shows dark veins spreading up his neck as if something is pressing from the inside. A voice speaks clear, calm, absolute. Confession accepted. Sentence carried out. Thomas convulses. The cam records the sound of bones cracking inward, like pressure collapsing a cage. His heart stops while his eyes remain open. At 9:51 p.m., the footage cuts to static. Thomas was found the next morning kneeling in the chapel, hands folded, spine crushed inward as if compressed by force. No fingerprints. No signs of a struggle. The chapel door was locked. From the inside, a retired guard later said something quietly to investigators. That room doesn't forgive. It weighs. Sing Sing's old wings are sealed again. But the river still goes quiet beside them at night. Some prisons don't need executions anymore. They don't need trials. They only need you to step inside and listen long enough to answer back. If you want more stories where abandoned prison wings still pass judgment, stay with this channel. Because some sentences weren't served. They were waiting. This prison is famous. Tourists walk through it in daylight. But there are sections of Folsom that even guards refuse to enter alone. Because the old stone remembers how people died here, and sometimes it wants another one. This is Folsom Prison, the historic Blocks story. The chair that never cooled from the outside. Folsom Prison looks permanent. Granite walls, iron gates, and the river below cutting through rock like it's trying to escape. The stone was quarried by inmates themselves. Punishment turned into architecture. That matters. The historic cell blocks are older, deeper, and colder than the rest of the prison. Thick stone absorbs sound. Light dies quickly. Even during the day, the air feels stale, like it's been reused too many times. One section is almost never mentioned during tours. The execution corridor. In 2018, a contracted restoration worker named Michael Torres was assigned to document structural decay in sealed historic areas after hours. His task was simple: photograph walls, mark cracks, and leave before midnight. At 11:11 p.m., Michael unlocked the gate to the old execution wing. His helmet cam shows narrow stone hallways, iron hooks embedded in walls, and a heavy wooden door at the end of the corridor, scarred, darkened, and reinforced from the inside. Behind that door sat the remains of the old execution chamber. The temperature dropped the moment Michael stepped inside. His breath fogged. The air felt thick, like pressure before a storm. Then the sound started. Not footsteps. A low electrical hum, rhythmic, pulsing, despite the wing having no active power. Michael whispered, "That's not possible." The hum responded. It synchronized with his heartbeat. As he moved closer to the chamber, the sound deepened. The door creaked open slightly on its own, revealing the outline of the electric chair. Wood, blackened, metal scarred, straps still bolted in place. The chair wasn't plugged into anything, but it was on. The hum grew louder. Michael staggered, clutching his chest as his heart rate spiked on the cam display. Shadows stretched toward the chair, bending unnaturally, pulling inward. Then a voice spoke. Not shouting, not threatening, administrative. "Seat the subject." Michael screamed and tried to run. His legs locked. The camera shows invisible pressure forcing him backward, step by step, until his calves hit the chair. His body convulsed as if electricity was already flowing through him. He begged. He cried. He promised anything. The straps moved on their own, leather snapping shut around his wrists and chest with bone-crushing force. The hum surged into a violent roar. Michael's final words were barely audible. "It's still warm." At 11:23 p.m., the camera feed went black. Michael's body was found the next morning strapped into the chair. Cause of death? Cardiac arrest with extensive internal burns. No electrical source was found. The execution wing was sealed permanently. A senior corrections officer later said, off record, "That chair doesn't kill people anymore. It finishes them." Folsom Prison still stands. Tours still run. Cells still echo with history. But some rooms were never meant to cool down. So if you ever find yourself inside an abandoned prison and hear a machine humming where no power exists, leave, because some executions never ended. They're just waiting for someone to sit down. If you want more stories where abandoned prisons still carry out sentences, stay with this channel. Some places don't need electricity anymore. They already know how to kill. This prison invented a system meant to silence men completely. No talking, no movement, no resistance. But when the prison was abandoned, the silence didn't leave. It learned how to listen. This is Auburn Prison, the old Blocks The story. The rule of quiet from the outside, Auburn Prison looks severe and unyielding. Thick limestone walls, narrow windows, towers that stare without blinking. It sits apart from the town, like it was designed to make noise feel unwelcome. Inside the historic blocks, sound dies fast. Auburn was the birthplace of the silence system. To acknowledge existence. Silence wasn't discipline, it was doctrine. What they didn't say was that guards had begun reporting responses to sound. In 2020, a structural engineer named Paul Whitaker was granted after-hours access to assess deterioration in the abandoned North Wing. He went alone, wearing a headlamp and body cam. He was told to keep noise to a minimum. At 9:48 p.m., Paul unlocked the gate. His cam shows long tiers of empty cells, stone floors polished smooth by decades of controlled steps. As he walks, his footsteps begin to change. Not echoing, answering. A half second after each step, a second step follows, softer, perfectly matched. His heart rate spikes. The hush grows louder, surrounding him, pressing in from the cells. The lights dim. From the upper tier, shapes form, human outlines pressed flat against the stone. Faces turned inward, mouths stretched wide, but producing no sound. Paul screams. The moment he does, the pressure hits. Invisible force slams him against the bars of a cell, arms pinned back, chest crushed inward. His scream cuts off instantly, replaced by choking gasps. The hush returns, calmer now, approving. The body cam records Paul's lips moving silently. Tears stream down his face as something forces the air out of him slowly, methodically, like punishment measured in seconds. A final whisper slides across the mic. You were warned. At 10:02 p.m., the camera cuts to static. No signs of struggle. The North Wing was sealed again, permanently. A retired corrections officer later said, off record, Auburn doesn't forgive noise. It corrects it. Auburn Prison is quiet now. But it's not empty. Some places don't need voices to function. They were built to erase them. So if you ever step into an abandoned prison and feel the urge to whisper, if you want more stories where abandoned prisons still enforce their rules, stay with this channel. Some systems never shut down. They just wait for someone to break them. This prison was so violent, they shut entire buildings down and pretended they never existed. But in the old facilities on this island, one rule was never written down. If you hear someone calling for help, it's already too late. This happened inside Rikers Island's old facility's T-Chi story, the call that crossed the water. Rikers Island sits in the middle of the East River, surrounded by moving water and city noise. Narrow yards. Units shut down after riots, deaths, and incidents. No report ever fully explained. They were abandoned quietly, locked, and left to rot while newer buildings took over. Most guards avoided those structures, not because of ghosts. In 2017, a maintenance contractor named Luis Herrera was assigned to inspect an abandoned intake building near the shoreline. The structure was scheduled for demolition, and he was there to mark hazards. He entered just after sunset. Windows were broken, letting the sound of waves echo inside. The floor was littered with paperwork, shoes, and broken restraints, left exactly where they'd fallen. Luis was halfway through the first hallway when he heard it. A man yelling for help, not screaming, not panicking, calling out clearly, calmly from somewhere deeper inside. "Hey, I'm hurt. I can't move." Luis stopped. The voice sounded close, real, human. He called back. No answer. Then the voice spoke again, this time from a different direction. Same words, same tone, same voice. Luis later said that's when he realized something was wrong. The building was repeating the call. As he moved, the voice moved too. Never ahead, never behind, always just out of sight, leading him past collapsed walls, deeper into sections that should have been sealed. The air grew colder. The river noise faded. Then Luis saw them. Footprints in dried blood, hundreds of them, overlapping, going in circles, stopping abruptly in the same spot near an old holding pen. The voice came again, right behind him. "I'm right here." Luis turned. No one was there. The floor gave way. He fell into the holding pen, slamming hard enough to shatter his leg. His flashlight skidded away, still on, lighting the walls. That's when the call started. Dozens of voices, all saying the same thing. All calm, all asking for help. They didn't echo, they overlapped. The walls began to flex, not cracking, but breathing inward, compressing the space. Luis screamed. The voices stopped. One voice replaced them. Low, close, certain. "You answered." His body was found the next morning when the tide went out. His leg was broken. His ribs were crushed inward, and his mouth was filled with river mud. The building was sealed permanently after that. If the water is loud enough, you can hear someone calling for help from the old shoreline buildings. And every year, someone tries to answer. The old facilities on Rikers Island are still standing, locked, empty, quiet, but the river carries sound in strange ways. So here's the question. If you heard someone calling for help, or would you let the island stay hungry? This prison closed its oldest wings without explanation. No fire, no collapse, no riot. Just one night where 3 guards lost control of their bodies, and one never got it back. This happened inside the old wings of Atlanta Federal Penitentiary THE story. The thing that learned how to wear men Atlanta Federal Penitentiary once stood as one of the most secure prisons in the South. From the outside, the old wings looked disciplined and clean. Red brick, narrow windows, nothing dramatic. That's what made them dangerous. These wings were built for long-term confinement. No daylight schedules, minimal contact. Inmates held for years in near silence. Guards rotated frequently because staying too long caused mental fatigue. That's what the reports called it. In 2009, the oldest wing was shut down permanently. Not renovated, not repurposed. Just locked and forgotten, while newer sections stayed active. No official reason was ever given. 2 years later, a night security supervisor named Calvin Rhodes volunteered to escort a federal inspector through the sealed wing to document remaining infrastructure. Cameras were allowed. Radios worked. Backup teams waited outside. They entered at 1:12 a.m. Inside, the air felt wrong immediately, heavy and warm, like a room full of people who weren't breathing. The inspector noted that sound didn't carry. Not intentionally. His body froze. The inspector asked if he was okay. Calvin answered, but the voice wasn't his. It came out deeper, slower, precise. "I remember this one." The inspector laughed nervously, thinking it was stress. Then Calvin's hands began to move on their own. He removed his radio, placed it on the floor, stood straight. His eyes rolled slightly back, not fully white, just unfocused, like someone watching something inside their head. The cameras caught his mouth moving before sound came out. Too much noise now. They ruined the quiet. The inspector backed away and called for extraction. Calvin turned. His posture changed. Not aggressive, corrective. He stepped forward, grabbed the inspector by the throat, and slammed him into the bars of a cell with inhuman strength. Bones cracked. The inspector screamed. Calvin didn't react to the sound. Then Calvin's body convulsed violently. Another voice forced its way out, higher, frantic. Calvin's real voice. "Don't let it finish." His jaw snapped shut. The grip tightened. The inspector died in under a minute. Backup guards rushed in moments later and found Calvin standing alone in the corridor, hands at his sides, breathing normally. No blood on him, no injuries. When asked what happened, Calvin said, "We corrected the problem." Medical staff later confirmed something impossible, but he could no longer sleep without restraints. Because every time he drifted off, something else tried to stand up inside him. Calvin took his own life 6 weeks later. The old wing has never been reopened. Former staff admit something they never put in writing. The entity inside those wings doesn't haunt the prison. It uses it, and it prefers bodies that already know the rules. The old wings of Atlanta Federal Penitentiary are still sealed. But guards working nearby say something unsettling still happens. Sometimes during quiet shifts, they feel the urge to stand straighter, to stop talking, to follow rules no one gave. So here's the question. If a place learns how to wear people, how do you know when it's done with you? Or when it's just waiting for a better fit?